Welcome to Between Drinks, a podcast where we travel the world one drink at a time. I'm your host, Caro Griffin, a mezcal sommelier, traveling bartender, and all-around drinks nerd. In each episode, I'll take you somewhere new to dive into a local drink that has a story to tell. We'll talk about its history and how it's made, but also its connection to the place and the people that make it what it is. There's a great story behind every great drink, and I can't wait to share them with you. If you caught the last episode, then you already know a lot about Japanese whiskey. You also know that there's no unifying style or quality that defines it, other than place of origin. And all that variety, it's about to get even wider. Up until recently, Japanese whiskey was dominated by legacy brands like Nikka and Suntory, which helped create such a strong global reputation that Japan is now listed in the same breath as countries that have been making it for way longer. But for this episode, I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about what comes next. Specifically, I want to talk about a new wave of whiskey producers who have started opening distilleries in Kagoshima on the southeastern coast. This area of Japan is known for its shochu, even referred to as the kingdom of shochu. And so that's where a lot of these distillers first learned to make spirits. And so they're bringing to whiskey not only different production techniques, but also different flavor profiles. And they're reimagining what Japanese whiskey can look like. Because, like I mentioned in the last episode, Japanese whiskey hasn't peaked. There are now over 70 whiskey distilleries in Japan, up from just 7 in 2007. And because whiskey has to be aged for a minimum of 3 years, many of those brands haven't even hit the market yet. So, if the first 100 years of Japanese whiskey were inspired by Scottish whiskey, then the next 100 might see a growing subcategory inspired by shochu in particular.
When you came down to the bullet train, it was quite urban, isn't it? But when you just drive about 20 minutes, you have this raw, mellow land itself. And to be honest, food are lovely, people are nice. The spirits made here, not just whiskey, shochu, is great. And compared to other Japanese city, I think this place is very unique because there are not many, no other prefectures making so many type of distillates, because we have 109 distilleries making shochus and 10 whiskey distilleries, which is the most in Japan. So we have so many difference compared to other Japanese prefectures. So I think that we have the own unique beauty. And I'm sure that you don't have to see volcanoes erupting every day, and not in Japan, not in any other places. So I think Kagoshima has its beauty. So so I think it will be a kind of hidden gem for the other tourists to be coming here. So I hope you'll be enjoying your stay in Japan, in Kagoshima, within these days.
Absolutely. I've loved Kagoshima so far. It's been lovely and does feel very different from other places in Japan. Kagoshima is a warm coastal area that's as far southwest as you can get without actually leaving the mainland of Japan. I took the train down, and as soon as I stepped outside, I immediately felt the change. The city has about 600,000 people, but it feels even smaller. I stayed in a small studio walking distance from the train station, and so I was dragging my rolly bag down side streets and over train tracks, definitely making the most noise of anyone else on the street because there weren't many. And I was struck by how quiet and calm the city really was. Later, when I ventured out for my mandatory konbini run, I found myself standing outside of my building, taking a look around and just not seeing one. No 7-Eleven, no Family Mart, nothing. I actually had to pull up Google Maps to find the closest one, which turned out to be 4 blocks away. Not far by any means, don't get me wrong, but a very different experience from the rest of Japan, where I'm used to walking outside, looking in both directions, and immediately finding one in my line of sight. This, to me, is Kagoshima in a nutshell. It's a bit off the beaten path, but it's still a city. You have to walk 4 blocks for a 7-Eleven, but it's still only 4 blocks, you know? I also found that, likely because it's not inundated with tourists, English was way less common, but people were even more welcoming. There was this sense of, why are you here? Not in a rude way, but in a way that was like, we love our home and are happy you're here, but also somewhat surprised that you see something in it too. At a time when the pushback against tourists is very real in some parts of the world, it's nice to remember that there are plenty of places that do want you there. Not just because they work a job where their livelihood depends on it, but because they too like to meet new people and show off a place they love.
So when our company was incorporated in 1883, and Kagoshima is more famous for sweet potato than rice. Because due to Sakurajima, we have some volcano and there's a volcanic soil. Volcanic soil is not suited for growing rice. It was more easier for the growing sweet potatoes. But we have been using rice for centuries. We have been making rice shochu, and rice shochu was more considered more luxurious items because it was very difficult to grow around here. So that's why we're talking about whiskey making. We want to go for more like a luxurious spirits, not for the bottom shelf one. So that will be something different. And moving on to second generation, this gentleman is Kanosuke Komasa, and he has he has been to the Pacific Wars and traveled around Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia at the time was ruled by the British or French or the Dutch. Therefore, he had the chance to see the Western cultures. And Western cultures includes spirits and liquors. Therefore, he has learned that maturing spirit in a cask enhances quality and makes the spirit more mellow. Therefore, when he came back to Japan, he matured his rice shochu in a cask. And he had it matured for over 6 years. And this product became very popular in 1960s and 1970s. Therefore, he decided to build distillery. So, he wanted to promote shochu to the world. And this dream was succeeded to his grandsons.
Kanosuke is a distillery on the actual coast, not too far from the city itself, in a town called Hioki, or Where the Sun Sets. It was raining when I went, which totally ruined my plans to see their epic sunsets, but it was beautiful, even covered in a little rain. At the first opportunity, I followed the craggly path from the distillery's back door to the actual shoreline. It was basically what I imagined the Scottish Highlands to be, just a little warmer and muggier because of the climate, and almost as green. I stood there on that cliff in the spitting rain, the shore in front of me, lots of trees at my back, and while I logically knew there were dozens of people in the distillery itself, it was mostly hidden by the trees, and I couldn't actually see anyone for miles. It was just one of those moments, you know? And to think, I never would have had that moment if I hadn't gone to a whiskey tasting in New Orleans. I first tried Kanosuke at a Women in Whiskey event last year and was immediately intrigued. Not just because their whiskey is great, but because they're doing something new and interesting with it. Their general manager, Roland Yang, steered me through a short tasting and told me about their connection to Kagoshima. And if the quality of the whiskey hadn't sold me, their story definitely would have. When I mentioned I was heading back to Japan in the spring, he encouraged me to stop by and, well, say less, Roland. Don't threaten me with a good time. I have gotten on a train for a lot less. And so get on the train I did. I spent the day touring the distillery with Tatsuya Ishihara, or Tats as he's often known. He's the brand ambassador for Kanosuke and a true whiskey nerd in the best way. I mean, he has a note on his phone with all the distilleries he's been to, and y'all, the number of distilleries I've been to since where Tats has come up, goals. But before we talk about Kanosuke and their whiskey, we have to talk a little bit more about shochu.
He tried to promote shochu to the world, taking to many places. Talking about award, we were able to win many spring gold, and so the result was nice.
Yeah.
Train was difficult because when you go back to your own country, I'm sure when you go to liquor stores, there will be some wine corners, whiskey corner, tequila corner, mezcal corner, and sake maybe.
Yeah.
But shochu, I'm sure definitely
Where do you
not.
put it? Yeah.
So those kind of distribution was very difficult. The quality was, was okay. But one of the customers said, why then you can make great distillate. So why do you make whiskey? And so that to promote shochu and to promote Kagoshima, he wanted to make a whiskey that had a shochu idea. And so that was his challenge.
A mile down the road from Kanosuke sits another distillery. It's called Komasa, after the Komasa family, and they've been making shoju for over 400 years. If you listen to the recent episode on shoju, then you already know all about it. But for those of you who skipped it, a little recap. Shoju is a distilled spirit made by fermenting crops like barley or sweet potatoes with koji, the same mold used to make sake. See, everything's connected here. Kagoshima is the unofficial capital of shochu and where most producers are based. And Komasa is one of the most established and long-running producers. They've been at it for over 400 years. Suffice to say, they know a lot about making shochu.
Most Japanese whiskey distilleries try to go for Scotch style because of the Japanese, the father of Japanese whiskey, Mr. Masataka Takezuru. He went to Scotland to learn how to make whiskey because it was his dream. And for also Suntory, Mr. Shinjiro Tori, he wanted to make a kind of Scotch type.
Okay.
Because that's why he asked Mr. Masataka Takezuru to be the first the district manager at Yamazaki. And also talking about Chichibu distillery, they wanted to go for the very traditional Scotch style. And there are so many Japanese whiskey distillery want to go for Scotch. But for us, we wanted to promote shochu and Kagoshima. Therefore, we didn't just make Scotch style. We also make Irish and bourbon style whiskeys, not just Scotch. Because we want to promote the shochu ideas.
Yeah.
So that's why we call ourselves next generation Japanese whiskey from Kagoshima as no one goes.
Part of the reason I love this story is that it's such a sneaky backdoor way of converting people to shochu, but it's done with such pure motives. Everything Kanosuke does is about showing the world shochu and celebrating Kagoshima. And that's so evident in their whiskey and the way they talk about it.
Basically, here is more like a shochu kingdom. And whiskey was considered as a spirit that is made in cooler places. Because, Scotland is much more cooler, isn't it? So it was very difficult to shochu people to understand whiskey is possible to make in Kagoshima. So that's why for our CEO, Komasa-san, he went to Scotland and to learn how to make whiskey, and he had to convince the local government that the whiskey making and shochu idea we could mix it. And so those things are very difficult. It's not romantic stuff, okay, but it's talking about cash flows. Whiskey takes time. Shochu, after distilling, leaving for less than 1 year, we are able to ship it. Whiskey takes at least minimum 3 years. So those kind of thing was very difficult. And whiskey, we have to be investing a lot. It is more complicated than shochu, I should say. So those things were very difficult to convince. So that's why we have to present 30 years business plan to receive the license for the whiskey making. We have to present to the local tax office.
Wow. So they just were worried about losing the taxes from the shochu if you switch focus to whiskey?
So, of course, believe that Komasa family has been making shochus for, and, Komasa is
big deal.
Yeah, big deal. Yeah, so if Komasa goes bankrupt, for instance, by doing the thing that is not suitable for this place.
Yeah.
So they're not just mean; they are caring about Komasa family. So that's why it took time.
Yeah, that really speaks to the community, though, where it's like, no, we care about you too.
Yeah, exactly.
You're a big part of this community. We want to make sure that you're here and continue to be a big part of the community.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that Kagoshima people are very kind, and the kindness is shown in different ways sometimes. So.
Yeah. Kanosuke was one of the first whiskey distilleries in Kagoshima, and it opened in 2017. Now, just 7 years later, there are 13. That's more than any other prefecture in Japan, in an area that people thought was ill-suited for making whiskey. Not only did Kanosuke start a trend, but they're making special whiskey that's a little different from the Japanese whiskey we normally think of. Starting with the production methods straight from the shochu world. They do long fermentations of more than 120 hours, much longer than Scotland's typical 2 to 3 days, in stainless steel vats to block bacteria, just like in shochu. They use a blend of yeast, not just one commercial strain. Their distillery has 3 different stills with different neck shapes and angles, which gives them a lot of flexibility in the type of spirit they make and how it's blended. They focus on getting a really clear, primarily unpeated wort that tastes fresh and fruity, and that's going to impact the final flavors that come out of the barrel. And part of their lineup is aged in casks that were previously used for their rice shochu. It was when I tried this particular whiskey that comes from the shochu barrel that I really had to take a second and be like, wow, this is not like anything else I've ever tried. But oftentimes when we say this is interesting or unique, it means it's like funky or weird and it's not something we want to keep drinking in glass after glass. And that is not the case with Kanosuke. And I think that is why I love it so much, is that they managed to kind of straddle that line between this is interesting, but this is also crushable as much as you want to crush whiskey. This is super easy to drink while being interesting. I love the effect of the lights coming on. Oh, this smells
totally different, isn't it?
Totally different and so much stronger in a great way.
Yeah. Because basically we don't open shot too much. And also the aroma you get is here, you get more like a maple syrup and madeleine, like a baked cake. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is our ex-shochu cask. We have been making rice shochu matured in cask. So first, we will be buying a 450 liter size. Then we will be filling with a rice shochu. So then we will be taking it out. Then we will be filling with another batch of shochu, rice shochu. So we will be using it around 10 years plus.
Oh.
After that, we will be filling with our malt whiskey distillers. That is very different compared to other Japanese whiskey distilleries, because most whiskey distilleries would be having this ex-shochu cask. In Japanese craft whiskey distilleries, most of them would be having bourbon barrels, about 80% plus. But for us, since we have about 20 to 30% of this cask, and we can use a lot of this when we create a blend. So that's why that will be giving very different flavors compared to any other Japanese. Basically, the flavor you'll be getting is that aroma of koji itself. Koji, for the aroma, you tend to and flavors, you tend to get Japanese cinnamon notes, which is very unique. Because again, no other Japanese whiskey or no other Scotch is using it. So that's why we have some distinctive flavors. So that will be a very kind of advantage of us from, since we're making shochu.
That was Tats giving me a tour of the different barrel warehouses at Kanosuke, each of which has its own distinct aroma based on what kind of barrels they're using and how long those barrels have been in there. Whiskey has to be aged for a minimum of 3 years, but there's a somewhat misconception, somewhat valid belief that the longer you let it age, the better the whiskey. We talked at length in the last episode about how I think age statements in whiskey are overrated, and Kanosuke is just another example of why. Time in a barrel is not apples to apples. Kagoshima's climate is warmer, and so their whiskey can theoretically mature faster. That doesn't come without its trade-offs, though.
Talking about whiskey, this climate data is very important. It's not too much different compared to Scotch, actually. But what's different is that summertime, it's super hot. As you can imagine, we're in southern tip of Japan. But wintertime, we have snow. So this temperature fluctuation gives us much very fast maturations. Talk about Scotch, and angel share is about 2%. For us, we go for about around 6 to 8%. So we lose a lot. We pay a lot to the angels, therefore we get our payback time much faster than a beer. Because we believe that Scotch, it takes about 10 to 12 years. For us, well, it's very difficult to say because we don't have such data. But when I ask people to drink our whiskey, we are telling our background, and most people will be asking how old this whiskey is. Then, if I'm given that question, I always ask back, what do you think? And most people really answering it's about 8 to 12 years old. But the answer is actually about 4 years. So, which means that our whiskey matures about 2 to 3 times faster than Scotch.
Climate plays a big role in whiskey, so let's dig a little bit into why. It's all about the aging or maturation stage. After whiskey comes off the still, it's aged in a barrel, usually one that previously held bourbon, other whiskey, even sherry or wine, or in Kanosuke's case, even these shochu barrels. It's this time in the barrel that gives the color and flavors we often associate with whiskey. Tats mentioned an angel share. This is a very common whiskey term and a really lovely turn of phrase, in my opinion. It refers to the portion of whiskey that evaporates during the aging process, aka the share that goes to the angels. So when you age whiskey in cooler climates like those found in Scotland or Hokkaido, it takes longer to mature, but you only lose about 2% of your whiskey on average. Kagoshima, on the other hand, has a much warmer climate, and so they lose 3 to 4 times that, but also theoretically get great whiskey much faster. The best spirits taste like where they come from, and Kanosuke is an unabashed love letter to Kagoshima. Right down to the fact that they're using shochu production techniques to make said whiskey in the quote-unquote kingdom of shochu. They use the phrase mellow land, mellow whiskey a lot, and that really tracks for me. If you like an unpeated scotch, a blended whiskey, or just a bold but smooth single malt, then you're sure to like Kanosuke. Also, if you ever get the chance, I highly recommend visiting their distillery. There's nothing like sitting in their quiet mellow bar, as they call it, with a panoramic view of the coastline, sipping some great whiskey. It's truly a beautiful space and a beautiful place. You can find the show notes for this episode at betweendrinks.co/mellowwhiskey. And there's no E in whiskey because we're talking about Japan here. You can find the usual links there to Kanosuke, their distillery, and their lineup of great whiskeys, plus the other stuff we talked about. And if you're new to Between Drinks, make sure you also sign up for my newsletter while you're there. It's basically a mini version of this podcast, maybe a little less nerdy and a few more funny stories about the shenanigans I get into while traveling around making this podcast. You can subscribe at that same link, betweendrinks.co/mellowwhiskey. For those of you who have joined me for the whole season, thanks for listening and for joining me on this not-so-little trip to Japan. This is officially the last season of the episode, but I may have an exciting surprise coming for you soon, so make sure you're subscribed at that link I mentioned. In the meantime, cheers!